Hilchos Tzitzis mitzvahs haseyachas v'hi lasis tzitzis al kanfi aksus bir mitzvazu beprokmelu peirik rishon onof she'oisen al knaf habeged mimin habeged. Onof literally is the type of branch. It means what? An extension that comes out of the beged that you make on the corner of the beged mimin habeged. Now later we're going to learn that generally when you're making tzitzis on any beged, you could make it mimin habeged. The amis you could make from tzemer upishtin, you're allowed to make for any beged. You're allowed to use tzitzis shel tzemer upishtin. But if you're using a beged of a different min, so you could use from that min. And generally, you use only from that min, as we'll learn in Perek Gimel. There's Nachamol. Onav she'oisen al knaf habeged mimin habeged. Is this onav hu anikra tzitzis? Mipnei shehu deimel letzitzis hareish, shenema v'yikacheni betzitzis reishi. Tzitzis reish means the locks of the hair. The hair that's braided together and the locks of hair, and that's the tzitzis reishi. Zehu onav, that's it. So that's why, since it looks like tzitzis, it's called tzitzis. The Torah calls it tzitzis. Zehu onav hu anikra lovan. It doesn't have to be white, but there's no specific color. And so here the Rambam writes that there's no real specific minyan l'chuti halavan. There's no minyan. In other words, how many chuti hatzitzis is not, there's no minyan. Now later on the Rambam is going to say that you put in the way we put in 4 long chutim, which those 4 long chutim become 8 chutim. And B'amis, the Gemara says, the Kosher brings the Gemara that says, Gedilim ta'asalacha, Gedil is a Rishtayim, and Gedilim is 4, and from the 4 becomes 8. So in other words, this L'chura we learn it out from a pasuk. We learn out from a pasuk that it has to be 4 that makes it 8. So the Kosher says that it means it's not clear in the Torah. It's not the Lashon Rambam. The Rambam says, Ve'ein l'chuti ha'onof minyan min ha'Torah. It means that it's not mefurish b'Torah the minyan. That's l'chura, not the pashtus. He says it's tzarchi, the Kosher leaves it with a tzarchi. Al kol parim nachamol. So we have this onof that comes out of the beged that's called tzitzis, because it's deimul tzitzis hareish, and that's called also lovan, because b'derech klal, because there's no specific tzeva. And there's no ein l'chuti ha'onav minyan min ha'Torah. Then v'loichen chut semer shenitzba ke'eina rekia, which we'll learn about later more pratim, and v'korchen oise al ha'onav, and v'chut zeh hu ha'nikrat chelos. This chut, which is nitzba ke'eina rekia, which were korchen al ha'onav, that's called chelos, and v'ein leminyan ha'kricha shekoire chut zeh also shir min ha'Torah. There's no specific amount how many times you have to be kerech. Is nimtzu b'mitzvah zeh shtei tzivuyes. There's one sheyasa lakonof onof yetzim imenu. That's the on of this the chutim which are hanging, and the sheyichrich ala onof chut chelos. Shneimar v'asul lahem tzitzis, and then v'nosnu al tzitzis hakonof psul chelos. So there's 2 mitzvahs: v'asul lahem tzitzis. V'nosnu al tzitzis hakonof psul chelos. And b'chlal, b'zman hazeh we don't have chelos. So it's brought down a remez that over there it says l'deira seichem, and then it says v'asul lahem tzitzis. V'nosnu al tzitzis hakonof psul chelos. But the word l'deira seichem says earlier. So no, that's the remez that the tzitzis is l'deira seichem. And chelos is not l'deira seichem, because l'pil there'll be a time that there won't be chelos. Al kol ponim, halacha dalet. Hat chelos eine ma'akeves halovan, v'halovan eine ma'akeves hat chelos. What does that mean? Ketzad. Harei she'ein lo chelos is eisel lovan levadi. That's pashut. V'chein. What does it mean that halovan eine ma'akeves hat chelos? V'chein also lovan ut chelos. V'nifsek halovan v'nismait ad hakonof. V'nisher at chelos levadi is kosher. So even if there's nothing left of the lovan, And the only thing that's left is the tchelis. You have to have the tzir exactly. I mean, the tchelis is the l'chura chut. According to the Rambam, it's only one chut. Those other Rishonim holds, the Rabbi holds, that the entire chut is tchelis. In other words, it's 2 chutim. We have 8 chutim. So 2 out of those 8 chutim are tchelis because one entire chut is tchelis. According to the Rambam, it comes out that only a half from the 4 chutim are tchelis. And so it's, in other words, one of the 8 chutim are tchelis. And here you're saying that there is a psachut shel tchelis. There was nishal levadi. You have to have the tzir exactly. How is the chut shel tchelis nishal levadi? The Chag of Shittas HaTesis is that 2 chutim are tchelis and 2 chutim are lov. There are 3 shittas. There's the shitta that you start off with 4 chutim, and those 4 become 8. So according to Tesis, pshat is 2 of those 4 are tchelis and 2 are lovin. According to the Ravid, 1 of those 4 chutim are tchelis, so it comes out at 2 out of the 8 are tchelis. According to the Rambam, only a half of those 4 is tchelis, so maybe we have 1 of the 8 chutim is tchelis. Yeah. But the Rambam is saying that the tchelis na ma'akev is halovin, lovin is ma'akev is tchelis. Then afal pi she'ein echad na ma'akev is chaveri. Aber einon shtei mitzvahs. Ele mitzvahs asei achas, und v'halei v'shtale sheyesh bo lovin et tchelis v'shneim ke'echad, harikiyem mitzvahs asei achas. Amru chacham rishenim, v'oye lechem letzitzis, melamed sheshneim mitzvah achas. That says, when you have a mitzvah, that each part of the mitzvah is ma'akev, mashal the daled minim of the lulav, or the arba kanfes of tzitzis. So obviously it's one mitzvah. Each part is not a mitzvah unless they have everything together. So everything together makes one mitzvah. Masha'inkin, where you have 2 things, that each one separately is itself a mitzvah. So the chura the seichel is that it's 2 mitzvahs. So that the Rambam is saying no. That be'emes, even though each one is not ma'akev the other, but nevertheless, the 2 of them together still remain one mitzvah. Are Tzitzis Manufactured, Shishnei mitzvah achas, and that's a special limud. Not sure what's nafkamina la'alocha. I mean, if it's 1 mitzvah or 2 mitzvahs. The Rambam be'emes in the Sharoshim and Sefer HaMitzvahs is Meireb, but they say l'chura the seichel would be that it's 2 mitzvahs, and the chiddush is no. That since they're both one inyan, what the inyan is the inyan of tzitzis. L'man tiskaru, you should remember the mitzvahs Hashem. So they're both one inyan. So although each one is not ma'akev the other, but since they're both one inyan, so therefore they're not nimna as 2 separate mitzvahs, they're nimna as 1 mitzvah. So over there the Rambam is talking about nafkamina legabe minyan ha-mitzvahs, that they're not nimna as 2 mitzvahs. But is there a nafkamina la'alocha if it's 1 mitzvah or 2 mitzvahs? I don't know. What's nafkamina la'alocha? It's just that the Rambam l'chura in the Keppel said there's 1 mitzvah. Last is tzitzis al kanfi aksus. Now the Rambam is telling us the din of tchelis and lovin. He's saying that there's tchelis and there's lovin, and the tchelis not ma'akev the lovin not ma'akev the tchelis. So l'chura becomes in seir the shaila. So why the Rambam say it's only 1 mitzvah? So here the Rambam says avalpi that they're not ma'akev, and that's why it's be'emes 1 mitzvah. Could be one after gabi a bracha. I mean. Knows we anyways Moshe tefillin shel yad and shel rosh is also 2 mitzvahs, and from that some people make taka 2 brachas. There's a special bracha on shel yad, so special bracha on shel rosh, and you always make both. The Rambam passing is you only make 1. So I mean over here when you're putting around both together, you would also put on anyways make only 1 bracha. Anyways, ba'arba hatzitzis ma'akve zu ezu. Sharbatam mitzvahs. Over there it's clear. Arbatam is mitzvahs. So b'kitzur we have the mitzvah of the onof, the chutim, and then you put on the tchelis, and you can have lovin levad and tchelis levad. Ketzad oisen hatzitzis maschid mizav shel talis shuhi seifo orig. And those from a corner which is at the end of the part that's woven. Those vaistus, you can have fringes. If you have fringes, like we have something by talis on the bottom, they're like fringes. That's not part of the talis. You have to have only the part of the fringes were never orik. There's only one side. Masha'inkin over here, you have the Sefer Arik. Umarchik mimeno, from this corner, leyeser al sholish etzbois lemaila, and v'lei pochas mikesher gudel, shouldn't be too far, it shouldn't be too close, shouldn't be more than sholish etzbois, and not closer, it should be at least a kesher gudel in between. Umachne shom in this hole arba chutim, and the koiflom be'emtza is nimtza shmeina chuten mishuloshen tluyim in hakern. Ve'erech hachuten hashmeina in pochis me'arba etzbois. Im hoye yeser al kein afilo ame ishtaimes ksheres. V'chol etzbois is begudel. So it has to have a share of lefachis for gudlin. V'ye'echad mishmeines hachutim, here it says clearly, v'ye'echad mishmeines hachutim chut chelis, and v'ashiv is loven. So in other words, from the 4 chutim, only a half was tchelis. Halacha zayin. Then v'lekeach chut echad min alovan, v'kerich bekricha achas al shara chutim b'tzad habeget umanichei, and then v'lekeach chut chelis v'kerich be'shtei kriches b'tzad kricha shalovan v'kosher. And ve'elu hasholish kriches hein hanekroin chulya. So that's the first chulya. So in other words, you have the first one with the chut shalovan, and then the next 2 with chut shel tchelis, and then you're kosher. Then you're kosher. Then the Rambam continues. Now the Ma'aseh says in Gemara they talk about the Kesher Elyon. The Kesher Elyon midiraisa. The Maskonas and Gemara is that Kesher Elyon is midiraisa. Now, but pastors, what's Kesher Elyon? Kesher Elyon means that, and that's how it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Machaber and Shulchan Aruch says that you know, it's first, like we do. You take the tzitzis and you make a kesher. You make a double knot with the tzitzis before you start making any krichas, any chulias. You already make a kesher. And that's l'chura li kuva. Masha'inkin, the Rambam doesn't mention anything about this kesher. There's no mention at all of the kesher. So the Beis Yosef says that according to the Rambam, you have to say that this first shira after the shalish kriches, that's the kesher elyon. Agam, I mean, it's not so because that's the only kesher the Rambam mentions. He says the kosher. This is the kosher. That's the kesher elyon. The kesher elyon is not next to the beged like by us, but the kesher elyon is after the first chulya, which is after the first 3 kriches. Ve'elu hashalish kriches heina nekroin chulya, and then umarchik mat ve'isa chulya shniya b'chut shel tchelis levade umarchik mat ve'isa chulya shlishis v'chenat chulya achreina shu kerich bo shtei kriches shel tchelis. The last chulya that he makes is only shtei kriches shel tchelis or kricha achreina shel loven. So what's this? Why is that kricha achreina shel loven? Mipnei shehischel b'loven is Messiah bei. Shemaylim b'kedesh v'lei meridin. He started with loven and he finishes with loven. Because Mailim b'kedesh v'lei meridin. What's the Mailim b'kedesh v'lei meridin? So there's a Rashi in Menachos. Rashi says over there that since Vaistu is the loven has it a Maila l'gabe tchelis. The loven has a Maila l'gabe tchelis that first the Torah speaks about the loven and then the Torah talks about the tchelis. So it says that you should put the tchelis on the loven, that vasul Are Tzitzis, and then the psil tchelis is loshen. Then you take the tchelis and you put it on the tzitzis. So we make vasul Are Tzitzis, and then menosno al tzitzis hakanov psil al tzitzis hakanov. You should put up psil tchelis. So the tzitzis is more chashuv than the tchelis. So since you began with something more chashuv, so therefore to finish off with something less chashuv would be a yerida in the inyan. So mainly you want to finish off also with something more chashuv. That's the chura the avanas advar. But neishihitzchol b'loven Messiah beish ma'ilin b'kedesh v'lei merid. And this and the loven is a ma'ilin b'kedesh. V'lom, and why taka is yaschol b'loven? Kedei shehi samuk l'konef mina. Because b'derech klal the beggar is loven, so mainly you want that the loven should be next to it. Valderev zu eisa b'arba knofes. So B'kitzur, you start with the kricha of Lavan, and then you have the krichas of Tchelis, and then you finish off with the krichas of Lavan. And the reason why you finish with the krichas, the reason why you start with the kricha of Lavan is because you want it to be mimina konov. There's a Indian that it should be mimina. Ala konov, that mimina konov. And so Memeli also, agam, it's not leikuva, but in order it should be also deimala konov. And Memeli, once you started already like that, so Memeli, you want to also finish that way. Kam b'chol yisu eisa b'chol konov, leipachis misheva, the Gemara says connected sheva rekim, and v'lei yaser al shleish esrei. That's also connected the vav avirim between the rekim. V'zui mitzvah min hamufcher. Imli korach al chuz ya'achas is ksher, and v'im korach hatchelis al reva tzitzis is also ksher. V'nei tchelis sheyiyu kol achulyes b'shlish achutim ha'mishulashim u'shnei shlishayim onof v'tzorech lepardei at sheyiyu ketzitzis sar harish. So in other words, you want that the tzitzis should be nifra. There shouldn't be. They should be parted one from the other. They should be hanging like the tzitzis of the sar harish, like the hair of the sar harish. That's if you do. This is the say that the Rambam gave. If you have Lavan and Tchelis, if you have Lavan and Tchelis, what happens if halacha tesa is a Lavan b'leit Tchelis? Is lekech echad mishmenas achutim v'kerech esei al shar achutim at shlishon uminiach shnei shlishayim anof ukricha zu imrotza likrach esei chulyes kein shekerech b'tchelis reshus b'yodei. The Rambam said that's the minig of the Rambam that they make chulyas minig Chabad. V'imratza lichrech b'lei minyan chulyas is also esa. So notice, since you're not having the tchelis, so mainly the chulyas are not negay. It's not negay over here the chulyas so much. But kloli shel davar yischaveli is hakoruch shlish. The main thing is that the yofi is that a third of the chutim should be covered with the koruch should be a third of it, and the rest of it should be hanging without any krichas on it. Now, since it's a shtickle orah that the Rambam, people ask that l'chura, we mentioned earlier that the only kesher the Rambam speaks about is the kesher that you do after the first chulya. He doesn't mention anything about the ksharim and the other chulyas. In Gemara over there, they say there's a kesher on each chulya. Each chulya that you make, there's a kesher. The Rambam doesn't mention it. He speaks about the kosher, and then he speaks about the other chulyas. Unless the pashtus advarim is that just like over there was a kesher at the end of the chulya, over here there's also a kesher at the end of the chulya. That's in the halacha over there when he was talking about with tchelis. Now, when he talks about weiter, if you have love and b'lei tchelis, also the Rambam doesn't mention anything about a kesher. He speaks about, he takes one of the shmeines chutim, and his kelis eichli al shar chushim at shlishon. Uminiach shleish shishem offer. There's enough. There's no. Also, you have to understand l'chura kesher elyon is deiraisa. You have to have a kesher. L'chura kesher is very negaya. The Gemara learns it out from the fact that shatnez is mutter b'tzitzis, and if there would be no kesher, so then it wouldn't be a din shatnez. The fact that we need a heter for shatnez b'tzitzis is the charaya that the tzitzis is kosher to the talus. So mela, you need a kesher. I'll call upon him, but the Rambam doesn't mention it. Yeah. So the Rambam finished off that kloli shel davar yischayev liyas hakoruch shlish v'onav shnei shlishim v'yesh v'sheini medaktik davar zeh b'lovan and v'im korach halovan al reva chutim eshli korach halachul yachas kshev. That's pashut, that it's kosher. The question is it lechatchila that it should be a shlish and shnei shlishim? So b'negeya tchelis it's clear that it's lechatchila the tchelis the koruch should be one shlish. And what's hanging should be shnei shlishim. When you get lavan, there's yesh. The Rambam says also over there you should try to do that. In other words, whether you make chulyas or not is not so negea. But the ikar is negeh that it should be a third and 2/3. And then he says, Yeshmi, that's not makbid b'negeh. If you only have lavan, you're not makbid, that the karach should be a third and the other should be 2/3. Yeah. Echad halacha yud. Echad chutei alavan ve'echad chutei atchelis. Imrata la seison shzurin oisa. So you know that you take thin threads and you entwine them. You make them. You entwine them together, and then you have a thicker thread, which is comprised of a few thinner threads. Afilu hoya achut kafel mishmein achutim v'shozur achenase psil echad. You took 8 thin strands and you made it into one thicker thread. You entwined them. You made it into one thicker thread. Is ein nechsher al chut echad. That would be considered one chut. And mainly you'd need 4 chutim or 8 chutim, but this would be considered one chut. Chutei Tzitzis bein loven bein tchelis tzrichen tvia l'shem tzitzis. When you spin the tzitzis, you make them into threads, so they have to be spun l'shem tzitzis. Vein eisen eison, that's the number 1. The number 2. Vein eisen eison leimen atzem and hanechas baketzim. Whereas when the shepsalach are nechas baketzim, so some tzemer falls off. Kshatzein reiftzim b'neim. V'leimen hanimin hanitloshim and habehema from strands that fall off the behema. V'leim mishuri shesi sha'erig mishayir b'seif habeged. And knows at the end there's a bit of left over from the shesi. That's the shesi is the vertical threads. Ha'erig mishayir b'seif hashesi b'seif habeged. Stuff left over. So you have leftover threads that are extending beyond the horizontal threads that you did in the ariga. So you shouldn't use those threads. That's like you should use proper. You should take wool and make with it threads for tzitzis. So now there's more bechovedi. Element hagiza shel tzemer iman hapishtim. So you don't make it from these type of threads. You're not allowed to make it from tzemer hagozel. So if you take tzemer hagozel and you make it into threads, so it's not kosher for tzitzis. Why not? Because it says v'asul lahem tzitzis. It should be shalahem. So tzemer hagozel is not yours. Now the question is if you're kind of b'shinui. So some rishenim hold that when you say you're not allowed to use tzemer hagozel, it means you're not allowed to take stolen strands. And those, if you have already chutim, and that the chutim were already made, now you went ahead and stole the chutim, so there's a problem because it's tzemer hagozel. Masha'inkin, if you steal raw wool and you take from the wool and you make from it chutim, you spin the wool, so that's not considered tzemer hagozel. That's not considered chutim hagozel because it's already you were kind of b'shinui. But the Rambam doesn't hold like that. The shaila is if it's considered a shinui achezel briyosei. So the Rambam holds that if you take tzemer, you make it into chutim, so it's considered a shinui achezel briyosei. And memela, so that still goes in the gather of einu shalachem. So bekitzer, ein eisen leimen tzemer hagozel, and v'lei mishil ilar and yidachas, because it doesn't have a shir, ksusi mechzes shiur, it's chayv and sreifa. V'lei mishal kotchim, also we learn out a limud that it has to be mishal chel. V'im asep sul, if you did it of tzemer hagozel or kotchim, so it's all puzzle. L'chura is going maybe on all of them, not only on this. V'im asep sul is going on, not sure if he's going on also nechas bekeitzim. L'chura over here starts again vein eisen eison. L'chura before he said vein eisen eison element hagiza and then vein eisen eison. Not sure if the puzzle goes also on the earlier one of Mevarazan. Hamishtach v'lebehema is tzamra puzzle tzitzis. So there's a din that even though when you mishtach v'lebehema, the behema doesn't become asur b'ano because there's no tfisas yidei adam, and the tzamra also doesn't become asur b'ano. but it becomes most ligoveya. It becomes most ligoveya. Behemi you're not allowed to use ligoveya, and also the tzemah you're not allowed to use l'tzitzis. Aval mishtach v'lepishtin hanatua is harei ze kosher shari nishtana. So in other words, it's nishtana at kedei kach that it's not even considered most. In other words, since it was mechubar lekarka, it was a different metzius, and now you're taking it and making it pishton, so it doesn't even go into the gather of being most. Memela, you're allowed to use it for tzitzis. Tzitzis she'osa segoy psula shnemer daber el bnei Yisrael v'osu lehem tzitzis. Avalim osa oisa Yisrael b'lei kavana ksheira. There's no din in kavana in asiyas tzitzis, but it has to be done ayidei Yisrael. The tzitzis shenasis min ha'osui is all mikoidim is psula. In other words, it has to be tasa. You have to make the tzitzis. The Rambam is going to give a few digmois when there's a chsarn of tasa v'lei min ha'osui. Tzitzis shenasim min ha'osui mikoidim is psula. Ketzad. Hevi konov sheyesh ba tzitzis. V'tofra ala beged. So you have one konov, you put tzitzis on it, and now you took this konov with tzitzis and you connected it to the beged. So now this beged has tzitzis on one of the corners. Afili yesh be'esi ha-konov amalama. So the konov is a large konov. It in itself could be a beged. But lepeil, now it's part of the next beged. So now this tzitzis is being mated the next beged is psula. Shnema v'osu lam tzitzis. There has to be a mais asiyah. Leimin osu. Sharei zedei melamishin meila. Even though he made it, and he made it on something which could have been chai b'tzitzis itself, but now it's becoming part of another beged. So now it's daimus. So the other beged, smit hamol, has tzitzis because you attach the beged to it, and now it has tzitzis. Umutler lahater tzitzis mi beged zeh will replace it with beged acher bein lovim min tchelis. Shluchur is a separate din. Shluchur has nothing really to do with this din of tasav leimin osu. So the chur over here also, that you could take these tzitzis that you attached with the konov, so you could take it off the konov and then re-put it back on the konov. Now you have another case of tasav leimin osu. Toli achuti ben shnei knafayim mizul lezu. So you're supposed to have 4 chutim, and those 4 chutim are going to turn into 8. So now you took 4 chutim, and you put it through the hole of one corner, and then you put the extension of those 4 chutim that you just put through the hole of one corner, you extended it and put it into the hole of the next corner. So now you have 2 chutim sticking out. You have the 4 chutim sticking out, one end outside of one corner, and the other end outside the other corner. And then you went ahead and you made the tzitzis on each corner. In other words, you had the tzitzis on each corner, while the tzitzis were attached to the other corner. The chutim were attached to the other corner, the 4 chutim. So you made the tzitzis at one end, you made the other tzitzis at the other end, and then you detached the 4 chutim, and now it became separate knofim. So when you made the tzitzis, since they were attached to each other, so mela was puzzled. It wasn't really puzzled. It wasn't kosher tzitzis. And now when you detach it, all of a sudden the beggar has 2 kosher 2 tzitzis. So these tzitzis were tasa. It was a osi. It wasn't a tasa. Tola chutim ben shnei knafayim mizulazu. You hung up the chutim between 2 knafayim. V'koshar konav zukil chasa, and then v'konav zukil chasa. V'achar כך chotchon be'emtza v'nifredu zeh mizeh psula. Shalei be'eshe koshron hoyu psulim. What was the psul? The psul was because the 2 knafayim were mu'ur and zeh. There has to be like on each konov you have tzitzis. Now you have tzitzis that are connecting 2 knafayim. Posak v'nasu shtei tzitzias nimtza osu min osu. Oisim min osu. Now all of a sudden you have a gemachte tzitzis, but you didn't make the tzitzis while the tzitzis were being kosher. That's a second case of tasav leimin osu. The first case was you put it on the konov and you connected it, and now you have that you made a tzitzis between 2 knafayim. Then hitl tzitzis al tzitzis. Because you have tzitzis already, now you put another. You have already tzitzis on a konov, and now you put again tzitzis. You put again through the same hole or in a different hole. You you put another 4 chutim, and now you're making again tzitzis. So you have 2 tzitzis on the same conif. Is im nischav levatel sorishena. If when you put the second tzitzis, your intent was to be mevatel sorishena, so matter sorishena echayt chok sheir, because the second one, since you had intention to be mevatel the rishena, so the rishena became bottle, and the second one became kosher. And it was asiyah v'asulam tzitzis. You made kosher tzitzis. If you weren't nischav levatel sorishena, you wanted to have 2 tzitzis, so now you have 2 tzitzis. So they both become puzzled, because since it's baltesif. So as afal pisha chot techakas mishneim, now you're going to cut one of them. Is ariza psula? Why? Sharik shehesiv is the pasal akel. When you added the extra tzitzah, you were pesel the other tzitzah. Ukshehiter chot techatesis. Now you cut off the extra tzitzah, whichever one the extra one is nimtza hashar nasim and asi. Whereas by adding the extra tzitzah, you made all the tzitzis possible. Since you made all the tzitzis possible, so now you have possible tzitzis. Now, how are you going to make them kosher? By cutting one off. By cutting one off, that's tasav le'manasi. Over there, when you made it, you hadn't zin that this should be kosher, the other one should be possible. So mainly you invalidated the other one, you validated this one, and then you got rid of the one that was invalidated. That's no problem. But over here, they all became invalidated. So by taking one off, they don't become validated. That's tasav le'manasi. V'chein, another case, a pashta case, hamatul abal shalish. Notice this beggar only has 3 corners. V'acharkach ishlim alarba. Now this beggar has 4 corners. And then v'hitas l'reviyah. And then you put in the 4th corner is kula psula. Mishum tasav le'manasi, because when you put the 3 corners, it wasn't mechuyev. So now all of a sudden you have a beggar of 4 corners with tzitzis. When you put in the tzitzis, it wasn't kosher. Now to Rebbe, the Emes writes that the 4th is kosher. The Levush paskins that the 4th is puzzle. So you have to understand why. The 4th is puzzle, because once there's a psul in the other 3, the 4th is also puzzle. You have to understand, I'll call upon Alter Rebbe paskins that the 4th is kosher. Because the first 3, when you put it in, weren't kosher, but now you have a 4th, and now this 4th is now it's a balus arba, which is chayiv and tzitzis. So you put in the 4th, and the other 3 you have to get rid of, and then put it in again, or take them off and put it back on. Halacha Yud Zayin. Ein kefil tzatalis l'shnayim umatilin tzitzis al arba knafa. Just by folding it, and now all of a sudden the corners are not the far corners, in other words, they're closer. They're the corners as they are with a folded talus. Al arba knafa kshit fula ela im kein tofra kula. Va'filu miruach achas. If you sewed it up. So now that's the way the beggar is. The beggar is a double beggar and sewn up, even from one side. It doesn't have to be sewn from all 3 sides, but as long as it's sewn, so we know this is the new tzir of the beggar. So therefore, the 4 corners is the new 4 corners, which are the way it is in a folded beggar. Nifsak hakonov sheyesh bo hatzitzis. The entire konov came off, because you have a pair of tzitzis, and the entire konov that has the tzitzis fell off. So it depends. If it's chutz l'sholish etzbois, so you have now a piece of konof, which is 3 etzbois by 3 etzbois, which has tzitzis on it. Is teifra b'mkeima, b'teifra b'mkeima. You could sew it back and reattach this konof to the beged. However, it's b'teich sholish is leitfer. If it fell off b'teich sholish, so then you're not allowed to sew it back. And is this a machlekes? A machlekes are rishenim. Alter Rebbe brings both days. So some days hold no, that even if it was cut chutz misholish, how could you return it back? This is not it. That's again tasav le'manasi. Alter Rebbe said earlier. He said earlier in Halacha Yud Gimel that if you have a kon of sheyesh b'tzitzis and you attach it to a beged, so that's considered tasav le'manasi. So over here also you have a kon of sheyesh b'tzitzis and you're attaching it to a beged. So memela you can't do that. But this shita holds, this the Rambam, that, and Alter Rebbe brings this there, that since this konef was part of the beged, and this konef still has a psadin beged, because it's sholish al sholish, so it has somewhat of a din of a beged, not a beged that's chai b'tzitzis, but somewhat of a din of a beged, so you could reattach it. If the konef doesn't have sholish al sholish, it's mamish, so then it doesn't have a din of tzitzis anymore, and therefore you can't reattach it. Masha'inkin, if it has sholish al sholish, so it has a minimal shear of beged, there got to be certain things. So and it was part of this beged originally, so therefore it could be reattached. Nismata zavishal beged, shebein chutei atzitzis ubein seifa orig. The thread went away. Afilu le'nishim in the orig ela kol shehu is ksheira. So although lechatchila said that it has to be far from the konof, the size of a gudel, not more than shlosh boys, but the minimum, the size of a gudel, but that's only lechatchila in the beginning. But later, when you have already the tzitzis and it was kosher, and the threads went away and it became less, so that's also kosher. Is ksheira. So if the chuti atzitzis is only k'dei aniva, is kosher. It's a whole issue. What does k'dei aniva mean? If aniva means aniva on each chut separately, or aniva on the other chutim, that's an issue. The Rambam doesn't say what's k'dei aniva. And then the nifsa kachut mi'ikrei, afilu chut echet psula. If the chut became nifsak mi'ikrei, there's no chut at all, and l'chura, according to the each chut was made up of two chutim. So l'chura means, that's how the Mefarshim explained, that nifsak achut mi'ikrei means that both chutim, the same chut, there's no chut left. There's one of the four chutim are completely not left. So it's psula, so it's possible. Now the question is, if it's possible, l'chura, if you're missing a chut shalovan, but you still have tchelis. So it's possible from a lovan. In other words, there's a chiv to have lovan and tchelis. If you have tchelis without lovan, there's also a mitzvah, but there's still a chiv to get lovan. And if you have lovan, there's a chiv to get tchelis. Now the chidush is, if you have lovan and you don't have tchelis, if you have tchelis and you don't have lovan, so you also be mekayim a mitzvah. But over here we're saying nifsek achut mi'ikrei. Afilu chut echad is psula. It's psula from that chut. There's that chut, it doesn't have a din of a chut anymore. And memela, it's missing the lovan. Elamai, you have tchelis, good. So you're kind of the mitzvah of tchelis, but you're still missing the mitzvah of lovan.